Every year, millions of people visit Yosemite National Park. Most return home with photographs and memories, but since records began in 1909, 33 people who entered this park have never come out. They are not the victims of accidents with known causes. They are simply gone. Hikers, campers, experienced outdoors people who walked into one of the most visited parks in America and vanished without a trace. These are 4 of their stories. Yosemite National Park covers more than 750,000 acres of the Sierra Nevada mountains in central California. 94% of that area is officially designated wilderness, meaning no roads, no cell service, no infrastructure of any kind. Each year, roughly 4 million visitors come here. Rangers conduct hundreds of search and rescue operations annually. Most people who get lost are found. But since the National Park Service began keeping records in 1909, 33 people who went missing in Yosemite have never been found. Not their bodies, not their belongings, not a trace significant enough to close a case. 33 open files spanning more than a century. To understand why Yosemite keeps its missing, you need to understand what the park actually is beneath its famous views. The Merced River runs through Yosemite Valley with a current powerful enough to carry a person miles downstream. The granite cliffs drop hundreds to thousands of feet, with ledges and crevices that can hide anything indefinitely. Sound does not travel well through heavy pine forest. A person calling for help 100 yards off a trail can go unheard. And Yosemite experiences weather that can shift from warm sunshine to hypothermia conditions within hours. The park is not hostile to people. It is simply indifferent to them. And when something goes wrong, it keeps what the wilderness takes. The first recorded missing person in Yosemite National Park was A.F.P. Shepard, who disappeared near Glacier Point in 1909. Over the following century, hundreds of people would be reported missing in the park. Almost all were eventually found, but 33 were not. The cases that remain open today span decades, and victim profiles, experienced mountaineers and first-time hikers, the elderly and the young, people who disappeared alone, and people who vanished from the middle of groups. What they share is the park and the absence of any explanation for what happened to them. Today, we are going to focus on 4 cases, 4 people from 4 different decades who walked into Yosemite and did not come back. A 14-year-old girl who stepped away from her father for 5 minutes to take a photograph. A seasoned climber who had scaled Kilimanjaro and who went for a day hike while her travel group pushed ahead. An experienced backcountry hiker whose $500,000 search found only his backpack, and a 30-year-old man who disappeared from one of the most popular trails in the park, in good weather, in the middle of the afternoon, surrounded by other hikers. 4 cases, 4 sets of unanswered questions, and a park that has kept every secret. July 17, 1981. 14-year-old Stacy Ann Arras was on a 4-day guided horseback trip through Yosemite's High Sierra with her father George and 6 other riders. By late afternoon, the group reached Sunrise High Sierra Camp, 9,400 feet above sea level, set against an alpine meadow in one of the most remote parts of Yosemite. After arriving, Stacy showered, changed clothes, grabbed her camera, and told her father she wanted to photograph the nearby lake. He made her change from sandals into proper hiking boots. Then she walked down the trail with Gerald Stewart, a 77-year-old man from the group. Gerald was tired and sat down to rest after a short distance. Stacy told him she would go a little further toward the lake and come right back. A tour guide watched her walk across a granite slope toward the tree line. That guide was the last person to ever see Stacy Ann Arras. When Stacy did not return, the National Park Service launched a search immediately. For 9 days, up to 150 people, including 67 Mountain Rescue Association volunteers and 3 helicopters, systematically searched the area around Sunrise Lakes. They found one thing: the lens cap from Stacy's camera on the trail near where she was last seen. No camera, no clothing, no shoes, no blood, no sign of struggle, no remains of any kind. A ranger who worked the case reportedly said she seemed to have disappeared from the face of the earth. Stacy Ann Arras has been listed as a missing person with the National Park Service ever since. She would be in her late 50s today, August 14th, 2000. Ruthanne Ruppert was 49 years old and one of the most experienced outdoor adventurers you would ever meet. She had climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. She had spent New Year's Eve 1999, as everyone else worried about Y2K, at the top of a Colorado peak. She had come to Yosemite to join a 30-mile backpacking group trip across the park. But that morning, she woke up with a serious eye infection. The complication: Ruthanne had a prosthetic eye. The eye receiving treatment that morning was her only functioning one. She was sent away from the clinic with medication and an eye that was infected, all impaired, and had just been treated. Rather than rest, she decided to make the best of her day and go for a hike. A 15-mile trail from Yosemite Falls toward the community of Foresta. Search and rescue teams launched an operation after Ruthanne failed to return. They found nothing. Fireplace Creek cuts through a steep drainage system with ravines and drop-offs that can trap anything falling into them. 8 years later, in 2008, hikers found her backpack caught in the Fireplace Creek drainage. Searchers rappelled into the drainage and found a boot, partially consumed by wildlife. They found nothing more. Ruthanne Ruppert has never been found. Her case remains open. June 15, 2005. Michael Allen Ficery was 51 years old and had been a serious backcountry hiker for more than 30 years. He was not the kind of person who made careless decisions in the wilderness. On this Wednesday morning, Ficery set out on a solo multi-day hike from the north shore of Hetch Hetchy Reservoir, heading toward Rancheria Falls, Till Mountain, and Lake Vernon, before looping back. His wilderness permit was valid through June 19th. When he did not return, his family called the Park Service on June 21st. The search for Michael Ficery became the most expensive search and rescue operation in Yosemite's history. Teams from at least 5 county agencies deployed into the backcountry. The total cost of the search reached $452,000. Searchers eventually found Ficery's backpack near Till Mountain, in an area that was not on his planned route, on terrain described in official NPS reports as extremely rugged and hazardous. The backpack was there. Several items that should have been inside it were missing. Michael Ficery was not there. He has never been found. June 17th, 2011. George Penca was 30 years old, visiting Yosemite for the first time with a group of roughly 80 church members. Around 20 of the group hiked the upper Yosemite Falls Trail that afternoon, a strenuous, heavily trafficked route that rises 2,425 feet above the valley floor to the top of North America's tallest waterfall. The group reached the top around 2:40 in the afternoon. They decided to hike back down at their own pace and meet at the bottom. When the last of the group reached the trailhead, George was not there. No one had noticed him fall behind. No one had seen him go off trail. He had simply not arrived. 140 searchers from 12 different agencies covered the trail and the terrain around it. After 4 days of intensive searching, not a single trace of George Penca was found. Not on the trail, not off it, not in any drainage, not at the base of any cliff. His bank accounts have never been accessed. He has never contacted family or friends. In a location with hundreds of other hikers present on the same trail, on a warm afternoon in June, George Penca vanished as completely as anyone ever has in Yosemite. When you look at the full picture of Yosemite's unresolved missing persons cases, one thing is immediately striking. The cases do not cluster in one particularly dangerous area. They are distributed across the entire park. They span every decade from the 1900s to the 2010s. They involve experienced outdoors people and novices. The cases do not follow a consistent pattern of human error or terrain hazard because the park is large enough and varied enough that almost any pattern could emerge by chance across a century of visitors. The rational explanations for disappearances in Yosemite are real and well documented. The Merced River's current falls from granite cliffs, hypothermia, disorientation in dense forest. In most of the 33 cold cases, one or more of these explanations is possible, even probable. But in some cases, George Penca on a crowded trail in sunshine, Stacy Arras within sight of her group, a Michael Ficery's backpack found with contents missing in terrain off his planned route, the conventional explanations feel strained, not impossible, just incomplete. In September 2016, Peter Jackson, a 74-year-old experienced hiker in excellent health, texted his son to say he was on his way to Yosemite. His car and camping gear were found at White Wolf Campground. He simply did not come back from his day hike. 3 years later, in August 2019, his backpack was found in the Ackerson Meadow area on the west side of the park, miles from White Wolf, in a location that does not correspond to any obvious hiking route from his campsite. How his backpack reached that location has never been explained. Peter Jackson was never found. These are not legends or local myths. They are official, active cold cases maintained by the National Park Service's Investigative Services Branch, a federal law enforcement unit. The cases are listed on the government's own website, with case numbers, physical descriptions, and contact information for investigators still hoping for new leads. More than a century of park visitation, tens of millions of visitors, hundreds of successful rescues every year, and 33 people who went in and did not come out, for whom no explanation has ever been sufficient to close the file. Yosemite National Park is one of the most monitored, most studied, most visited stretches of wilderness in the world. Rangers patrol it. Satellites photograph it. Thousands of visitors walk its trails every day. And still, 33 people who entered it have never been found. A 14-year-old girl walked 50 yards from her father's site and vanished. A world-class climber went for a day hike with an impaired eye and disappeared. A man who had spent 30 years in the backcountry left his backpack on a mountain and was never seen again. A 30-year-old man on a crowded trail surrounded by hikers on a sunny afternoon simply did not arrive at the bottom. The park does not keep its secrets because it is cursed or supernatural. It keeps them because it is vast and indifferent and old, much older than the records we keep, much larger than the searches we mount. Whatever happened to these 4 people and the 29 others on that list happened somewhere in that wilderness. And the wilderness has not yet decided to tell us if the unexplained draws you here. If you need to understand the things that remain open, subscribe to Misty-Onyx USA. We will keep following the cases the forest has not finished keeping.